What's going on, Reefers? Blaine here, back in the studio, and it's been just over a month since last we checked in with the Reefer 250. I thought this would be a great episode this Thursday to talk a little bit more about the tank, see how things are going, see how things have developed, and also talk about some of the turmoil, some of the challenges we've gone through as we've gotten this tank rolling. As you all can see, we have a ton more corals in the tank from the last time we did a little shopping in the Top Shelf farm. Kevin has been adamant about getting more corals into this tank, and I think that's the best thing possible to do for a system, especially if you're trying to increase your microbiome. Every single time you add in coral, you're adding in the opportunity to get nice little microfauna, you're gonna possibly get coralline and all kinds of other great beneficial bacteria. Also, adding in corals is a lot of fun too because you're getting more corals into your system. Kevin did a bunch of looking around in the farm. He ended up choosing a bunch of really choice pieces. We found some nice SPS, we found some more zoas. As I mentioned earlier too, we found a bunch of LPS we've got into the tank. As you guys are seeing too, we had some footage previously taken when Kevin was adding in all this stuff into the Reefer 250. I want to say a big shout out to Kevin for making it happen and getting this tank all stocked out. I have to say, I have it pretty good having the Top Shelf farm right next to me and being able to fill out this tank with all kinds of choice corals. I do want to hear though, down in the comments, what corals do you guys think I should be adding in next to the Reefer 250? I'm really curious to hear from you guys because obviously we want to showcase Top Shelf pieces that you all want to grab up, and the opportunity to be able to showcase them here on the channel, see them develop out from frags to colonies is something pretty cool. We've got a bunch of new corals, we've added in some more rock, and there's a lot of different things that are happening right now in the tank. We'll go ahead and start off with a bunch of the corals that we've added in. We've added in some nice Bernard Poras, we've got the Laffy Taffy, we've got some new hammers, we've got a bunch of different Pictinias in the tank. We've also mixed in some Dragon up top, some SPS. We're really excited about all these new corals. We've got LPS, we've got SPS, and we've got soft corals. We're making this a truly mixed reef tank. I will say though, there's been a couple of zoas that we've put throughout the tank that we've had to do some shifting around. This is a really good note to everyone at home. If you put a coral in a place, you see that it's not doing well, maybe this is an opportunity for you to shift it around, put it maybe in some higher light, some lower light, or get it away from some flow, add some more flow to it. There's a lot of different things that these animals will need. So it's good to kind of get an understanding of how they're liking their area. If they're not liking it, maybe it's time to get them shifted over. When we're looking at all the Gonioporas in the tank, we've got a huge selection. We've got a bunch of really nice ones. We've got the Grandmaster, we've got the Glitter Goni. There's all kinds of different Gonis we have in this tank, and I have to say, I think it brought some really nice movement to a system. This is something that I always try to touch upon when it comes to tanks that I develop, tanks that I help set up. I really like to add in corals that bring some nice movement to a tank. So we're talking about LPS corals like Gonis, Alvies, things like that. Also torches, Euphilia, soft corals like toadstools, gorgonians. Corals like that I think bring a really nice dynamic style of movement to a system. I know when it comes to SPS lovers out there, we have a huge fan base when it comes to SPS here at Top Shelf Aquatics. We have easily some of the best in the country that we're aquaculturing here, but I have to say I'm a fanboy when it comes to the moving corals. I know SPS are really, really nice. It's the challenge of getting the colors, the challenge of making these grow out, but something about the movement that I really enjoy in a tank system. So I'm gonna kind of stray away most of the time from SPS corals, but that's an opportunity to try out more LPS corals and more things like that. The rock flowers have seemed to really enjoy themselves in this tank. I think they've definitely started to take off. At first, they didn't seem super happy, but a couple of them have found their spot over on the left side of the tank, and they haven't moved since, and they've really been growing out. This one directly next to me, this like pink with a little bit of blue in the center, has gone astronomically huge. When we look at some of the things that we're looking at adding into the tank, when we have a ton of rock space still that's open that we want to fill out, I'm really looking forward to filling out that top section. As it becomes more mature, we're gonna look at getting more of our SPS, our signature TSA SPS pieces, and getting them into the 250. The Mind Melt Monty though is doing extremely well. I'm excited to say we're seeing new growth on it. All the colors are definitely coming back. It started to pale out a little bit from the transition over to the new tank, but since then it's doing extremely well. It's growing onto the rockwork. It's starting to encrust a bit, and I'm really excited about it to start fanning out and opening up and covering that area of the rock. I know a lot of people are going to say that it's going to shade out a huge section of the reef tank, but in reality, there's only sand below it, so not too much issues there. And in reality, too, we can also try to fit in some low light corals down there, maybe some mushrooms, some more acans or things like that, maybe some more chalices. Speaking of chalices, I have to say our rainbow chalice that's in the tank right now is blowing up. It's doing extremely well. You can see a lot of new growth, a lot of really nice colors that are starting to come out of that coral too. Right next to the rainbow chalice, we also have the cloudberry that we've added in. This is a very unique chalice that we love here at TSA. It was one that I talked about on our chalice video too, and it's something that's been doing extremely well in the farm, so we thought, why not bring over a nice little mini colony and add it into the tank. I mentioned the pictinias earlier. We had this original Space Invader pictinia that was in the tank, and it's been one of the first corals that we added in. It's been doing well, it's growing out. You can see that there's some more eyes that are starting to develop. It's encrusting over the rock, but we decided to throw in a rainbow pictinia, and there's a couple more pictinias here in the back. Since we saw the success with the Space Invader, we thought, why not and continue the trend and add in some more pictinias. We've got our nice little zoa garden working too, as you can see on the rockwork. I'd love to hear also some other zoas that you guys think we should try out here in the zoa garden. We've got some really nice ones. We've got the TSA Chemically Altered. We've got Utter Chaos. I want to hear though from you guys what other zoas you think we should be adding into the reefer scape. Something that I've noticed with this tank that has been one of the challenges that we've gone through is the cleanup crew. I have to say, this is a very dynamic scape. It's kind of difficult for the cleanup crew to make its way around the tank and get onto the rockwork. Once we added in that second piece of rock over on the side, I'll talk about that here in a second, but once we added that in, it was basically an extra little ladder that the cleanup crew could work their way up and get onto the main rock work. I think that's been probably one of the biggest issues. You can generally see a lot of the cleanup crew on the sand bed kind of hanging out. So a lot of the times either me, Evan, or whoever else is coming by the system will end up grabbing a lot of the inverts and putting them onto the rockscape. It's obviously not something you want to have to do when you're running a saltwater tank, but it's something we do here at Top Shelf since we're here all the time. We're working here from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and obviously on the weekends as well. But if we wanted to make sure that we're ensuring that none of that old turf algae or anything that we had before, we had some hair algae in here, none of that comes back. Speaking of algae and all the woes, we also had what was a dino outbreak in this tank. That's actually the main reason why we added in that larger piece of rock. If you guys can tell, that thing is covered in coralline. It's a nice big thick porous piece, and I think that rock was super essential for us to get our microbiome in check. We definitely had a very new syndrome tank going on. We've had dinos, we had diatoms, we had hair algae, green cyano. We've basically gone through all kinds of different things with the Reefer 250, and I think the biggest thing from the start was the dry rock, not having enough biomedia into the tank. We should have added more of our biomedia that we actually carry here at Top Shelf. We should have added more into the sump down below. We thought we had enough, but in reality, I think we just needed more rock. So maybe some more sand as well too, just trying to increase that, active microbiome, the natural microbiome. And I think overall though, once we added in that new rock, we've seen a lot of really great coralline growth going on in the system. On the main scape, we're seeing a huge outbreak. We also added in some rubble as well, some more coralline based rubble throughout the tank to try and kind of intermix it and start getting it seeded out as well. When it came to the dino strain that we were dealing with in the system, we were dealing with Ostreopsis. This is one of the most common dinos you're going to see in reef aquariums. We talked about this in one of the last videos mentioning dinos, but when it comes to the strain that we had in this tank, we ended up throwing everything at the wall with this one. We turned up the temperature just a little bit. We did a blackout period. So we have the Ceche UVC that we added in down below. We had it directly in the display at first. I think what really helped out with the dinos across the sand bed that we're starting to try and work up onto the rockwork was the fact that the UV, the pump that was running the UV, was spraying and pushing all across the sand, and it was directly in the display, so it was getting the most work done. Once the main work was done, we were able to move it down to the sump, get it out of the display. Obviously not something we wanted to keep in there, but we moved it down into the sump now. It's going to be something we keep on the tank for the time being and for moving forward. Overall though, this was quite the battle to be able to get through the dinos here on this tank, but we we ended up handling it here in this system. We've got things all cleaned out, and most of the time, you're not gonna see your dinos in the beginning of the morning. As your lights will go through the end of the day, you're gonna start seeing these dinos popping up when it gets to the peak of those lights. So keep your eyes out, keep your eyes peeled, and see if you have any of those popping up in your system. I wanted to mention too, during the dino outbreak, when we did do the blackout period, it was a little rough on some of the corals. You can see up in the front, we have a piece of the fruit swirl, so that's that triple colored Setosa monopora, and it definitely took a pretty big hit during that blackout period. It bleached out quite a bit, but as you can see, still showing polyps, it's showing some color, and it's definitely gonna make a bounce back. This is another testimony to how strong and resilient these corals are that are being aquacultured here in the farm. It went through a huge blackout period. Most SPS corals aren't gonna fare well during that. We had a bunch of different things getting thrown at this tank when we were trying to beat out the dinos. And I have to say, it's really exciting to see that there's still some pigments, some colors that are showing, and I'm really excited to see the TSA fruit swirl come back to color. One thing I did want to mention, we have a lid that we keep on the tank all the time whenever we're not filming, but something that we've been dealing with is we've lost a couple fish to jumping. We have the tank completely covered, but the fish have been able to get through all these tiny, tiny little spots, so we ended up losing a chalk bass due to that. We lost a firefish due to it, but overall though, the rest of the fish have been fine. We tried adding in a yellow tang, as you guys saw in a previous video. That yellow tang ended up not making it. I think when it got into this tank, it was just outcompeted for food. It was just kind of a small guy, and I think he got picked on a little bit by the chalk bass. The chalk bass has basically become the king of the tank at this point, so we'll see if we can add in any other fish, but for the time being, we have the chalk bass, the starry blenny, we've got our firefish, and those guys have been pretty much holding it down here in the Reefer 250. As for myself, what I want to get into this tank a little bit more, I want to see a little bit more euphyllia. I'd love to add a couple more choice torches. One that I would really love to add in, that's right, Kevin, if you're watching at home, I doubt it. If you're watching at home though, Kevin, I want the TSA baby grill in this tank. I think it'd be awesome to get one of the TSA baby grills. It's easily one of the nicest torches I've ever seen, and to be able to showcase one here in the Reefer 250, here in the Top Shelf studio, I think would be really cool. I want to continue to grow out our Gawny garden. We have a lot of really nice Gawnies. I'd love to maybe toss in some really choice Alveopora as well, but we have a lot of really nice Gawnies that have yet to get released, and I'd love to get some of those here in the tank too. Other than that though, I think maybe adding in another fish or two. I would also like some more acans and some more chalices. One chalice I definitely want to grab is the Raja in pajamas. If you guys haven't seen that one yet, the TSA Raja in pajamas is an absolutely breathtaking coral. You guys can check out the article I wrote on it on Reef Builders. And if you guys want to snag up a piece, be sure to come over to topshelfaquatics.com, grab one up. I know I want to get one into the tank here soon. It's an unreal chalice. Some of the other corals that I've seen that have had great success in the Reefer 250 lately has been the plate corals. Originally during that dino outbreak when we had all those dinos in the sand, they weren't super happy, but ever since then, as the tanks cleared up and everything's looking nice and clean, the plates are looking unbelievable. This one right next to me, this green plate, is looking really nice and super fluffy. And then the plates on the opposite side of the tank are doing really well too. They're showing some extremely nice colors. And I have to say, I've really enjoyed seeing more plate corals. I haven't kept them before much in any of my own previous tanks, so it's fun to try them out here in the studio. As it goes for equipment though, we haven't made much changes into the Reefer 250 other than one thing in particular. We ended up swapping out the Reef Mat 1200 with a Reef Mat 500. With the size of the Reefer 250, we thought with the skimmer and all the other nutrient control we have going on in the system, we thought it was best that we downsize the roller mat. I will say the 1200 was just doing too much cleaning, and I think downsizing to the 500 is going to be the perfect fit for the Reefer 250 now. I will say though, having the reef mat on this tank has been extremely helpful, and it's keeping the water crystal clear. I have to go ahead here soon and pull the trigger and get one of these on my tank at home. Speaking of my tank at home, I've been asked a couple times by some of my coworkers here, mainly my main man behind the camera, Garrett. He's been talking about possibly showcasing my tank, my personal at-home tank here on the channel. Love to hear in the comments below if you guys want to see a tank tour of Blaine's tank in his own home. Go ahead, let me know down in the comments. never mentioned on the channel here or talked about really at all when it comes to the Reefer 250 is what am I actually feeding this tank and the maintenance that I'm doing on this system as well. When we're looking at what I'm doing for feeding on this tank, we're feeding them pretty much every single day. Also on the weekends, we have the crew coming in and feeding the tanks too. We're feeding them mysis shrimp, so basically the same exact thing that we're feeding over to the fish in the farm, we're feeding here in the studio as well. I'm also feeding the entire Reef Genetics phytoplankton line into the tank. I think having phytoplankton in your system is going to be extremely helpful and beneficial in many different facets, so I think adding that into the system has been really helpful too. We also are utilizing some of the Benepet's LPS pellets. We're using those a lot for some of the corals, some of the rock flowers, all kinds of different things. Even the fish too, we'll crush them up a little bit, put it into the power head or into the gyre, and it'll push it around the entire tank and everyone can kind of enjoy it. But that's pretty much it when it comes to feeding. We'll also put in a little bit of TDO every once in a blue moon if we don't have enough time to do the mysis, but we try to maintain and stick with the mysis that we're feeding actively in the farm. When it comes to the maintenance though, we're trying to keep this nice and simple. Obviously I'm scraping the glass here every other day or so, trying to make sure it looks nice and clean. But when it comes to water changes, things like that, we haven't gone into doing any direct dosing at the time right now. We're doing about 10 to 15 gallons for the water changes every single Friday after I get the numbers from Evan and Megan. Other than that though, for the maintenance, filling up the ATO container, making sure that the protein skimmer doesn't overflow, and swapping out roller mat, that's pretty much it for this system. It's pretty straightforward and it's kind of getting into cruise control. We're really excited to see this tank develop. I'm always super excited when people come through the studio and everyone's saying, hey Blaine, the tank's looking really good. So that's awesome to hear, especially from a bunch of people here at Top Shelf that I think have a pretty high standard when it comes to reef aquariums. So excited to say that this tank is really developing well. If you guys have any questions about this specific tank, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I'm sure maybe in the next couple months we'll do another update and then maybe we can do a more in-depth tank tour. If you guys have hung out all the way till the end, I want to say thank you so much. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future uploads.